Hey everyone, welcome to InfosecTrain. So today our video is about choosing a cloud service provider. I'm Krish. To know more about my profile, you can basically check my LinkedIn. So let's start, team. So first of all, to give you an idea on this, we have a lot of cloud providers in the market now. You can basically see nearly 50 cloud providers in the market now. Like there is a lot of cloud providers like Amazon, Azure, GCP, Oracle, IBM, Alibaba, DigitalOcean. There's a lot of cloud service providers now in the market. But the three key players are always AWS, Azure, and GCP. And there is a lot of cloud providers who is coming up, who is providing some vivid services. But still, our question is that, so how do I basically choose a cloud service provider? And I don't basically believe in saying that, okay, based on the market share, we can choose a cloud service provider. Or if somebody asks me, so which is the best cloud service provider, I will not be able to say which is the best one. The reason is because the cloud service provider is best only if they are able to meet your business requirement. Always watch out for your business requirements. And you consider a cloud provider as the best one based on your business requirement. So in my case, basically, let's say if I'm able to get a proper service from Amazon, I will say they are the best cloud service providers. If I get from Azure, they are the best. So basically, who is the one who is providing me the best cloud service? I will always consider them as the best cloud service providers. So if you look into the market share, AWS is always having the top market share and Azure is next and Google is coming after the next. Okay, that's it. So let's discuss about some key factors which I'll consider when we are basically moving on to choosing a cloud service provider. So first of all, see, before we go to a cloud platform, let's say it can be any cloud platform. Before we go to a cloud platform, the first and the foremost thing which we have to consider is to check if the cloud computing is suitable for your business. Definitely now almost 80% above companies worldwide want to move to cloud or basically moving to cloud platform. But how do you see if a cloud service provider is suitable for your business? As the cloud is providing various services and features doesn't mean that the cloud is suitable for your business. So first of all, you have to basically conduct a risk assessment and you have to basically see what all benefits you are getting when you move to cloud from your on-premises. So first of all, that's a very important thing to check to see if your cloud is basically suitable for your business. The second and the most important thing is basically the certifications and standards which the cloud service provider holds. Like for example, let's say team, when we go to a cloud platform, there is a lot of companies are moving to cloud. Like for example, financial institutions or medical institutions, a lot of companies are basically moving to the cloud platform. The providers that comply with the recognized standards and some frameworks and all. So once they comply with this, it basically demonstrates an adherence to the industry best practices and standards. And while the standards only may not determine the whole quality of the cloud service provider, but if the cloud provider is having a quality of or basically some standards and certifications, we can basically have a more trust and we can basically, it can help us in more, shortlisting some potential suppliers and all. Like for example, let's say if I want to get the compliance or if I have a cloud service provider who is having a PCI DSS compliance. So that means that the cloud service provider can basically support me in my PCI DSS implementation as well. If my cloud service provider is basically having some ISO certifications, so it can basically help me to decide or basically shortlist the particular cloud platform. So certifications and standards are something which can basically help a lot when choosing a cloud service provider. And the next one is the most important thing, which is what we call as a service and features. So basically, almost all the cloud providers provide some almost a similar kind of services. Like for example, in AWS, we have a service called as AWS EC2. The same thing in Azure is called as a Azure VM. In Google, we call it as a Google Compute Engine. So basically what happens, they are providing the same services, but how much service quality they are providing for your business or which service is basically more biasing to your business requirement is basically a very important thing. And also as a part of it, see if that particular service is having certain features as well. Like for example, let's say if I'm having a cloud service called as Amazon EC2, that particular cloud service may be having some benefits in one region in Amazon, but you have to check if they are providing all the required features in the region you basically specify. And the fourth one and the most important thing is what we call as a data security. So basically, end of the day, what happens when we are moving to the cloud platform, we are concerned about our data. So when we are concerned about our data, the security of data is a very important thing. See why? Because end of the day, whatever things go wrong, as a customer, you are the one who is responsible for your data. So when you have a cloud service provider, and if the cloud service provider is basically providing you proper options to secure your data, you can basically have a more trust on them, and you can basically, that also is a very important benchmark for shortlisting the cloud service providers. I can give you even one more example on this, the same thing. Like for example, let's say I'm going to Amazon or let's say AWS. So AWS is providing me a service called as AWS S3. So basically what happens when AWS is providing me a service called as AWS S3, that particular service called as AWS S3 is having certain security features, and see if that security features are basically aligned with my business requirements. So maybe like Azure is also providing, Google is also providing, but see if which cloud service providing the most value for our requirement. That's what we call as a data security. But always understand, whatever things go wrong, the cloud service consumer or the cloud service customer is always responsible for the data. So data security is something which we have to basically verify, or how much security we can get before moving to a cloud service provider. And the very important thing is basically what we call as a data location. Why it's a most important thing to us, team? Let me give you a simple example for this. Like for example, there is a word called as a data residency. That means that, team, certain data must only reside in some particular locations. For example, let's say for example, if I am processing the data of European customers, when I am processing the data of some European customers, I have to make sure the data of the European customers stay inside the European Economic Area, or basically in the countries which is complying with the GDPR. So like that, the location of data is a very important concern when we move to the cloud platform. And of course, the cloud is a global offering, and basically the cloud is accessible from anywhere in the world. So location can be a very biggest challenge in the cloud platform. And this is something which people has to be very much careful of, because if something goes wrong, it can affect their compliance and other standards also. So it can basically lead to a lot of legal challenges, compliance standards challenges, regulatory challenges and all. So basically what happens, data location or the location of the service is basically a very important thing. And we have to always verify that that particular service you require is available in that particular location. And the next thing is not so familiar to all of us, but still, team, there is a very important word called as a contracts and SLAs. So basically, how can I basically ensure something in the cloud platform? Let's say, for example, I'm going to Amazon, or I'm going to Azure, or I'm going to GCP, or I'm going to IBM. How do I ensure something? Let's say, for example, the cloud service provider is saying that they are providing me 99.9% availability, 99.99% availability. So how do I basically ensure this? So to ensure this, the only legal document which is basically valid for this particular purpose is the agreement or the service level agreement. SLA is a part of the contract. And basically, the contract is a very important thing. It's like a terms and conditions thing. And it must be very important for every customers. And when you're a large enterprise, you can always negotiate with the SLAs, and you can have your own custom SLA as well. But that is something which is very important for any kind of operations, for sure. And second last but not least, cost is a very important thing, team. Definitely, we are all concerned about the cost. So basically, before moving to a cloud service, compare different cloud providers for the various options they are giving us and what is the cost of it. And we have to do something called as a cost benefit analysis. That means that let's say, for example, AWS is providing me a service called as S3 for storing data. The same thing in Azure we call it as Azure Blob Containers. So basically what happens, see which is the best one, see which is providing more cheaper option, see which is providing the most value for the cost you're giving. So based on that, you can choose that. And the next one is very important, migration. So just in case, let's say, for example, now you're working in the cloud platform. Due to any reason, if you don't like the cloud provider, if you want to move from that cloud provider to another, there must not be any constraints you must have. You must be able to move. Like, for example, let's say now, as of now, I'm using Amazon. But after some time, if I feel Amazon is not good for my requirement, if I feel Amazon is not able to meet my business requirements, I need to be able to move from Amazon to Azure, or let's say some other cloud providers. That is what we call as a portability. So we have to very clearly understand the portability requirements of the cloud provider. We call it as a port out requirements, or we call it as an exit strategy. So in the contract, we have to clearly mention the portability requirements. Why? Because let's say, for example, if I'm using some kind of vendor specific services, and if I want to move from that vendor to another, what happens there? I may be stuck up. Why it is the problem? Because when I basically try to move from one provider to another, and if I'm using a specific service, I may not be able to properly move. So that's basically lack of portability. So to avoid that, we must always make sure there is a proper portability option also. And there must be the interoperability as well. What is interoperability, team? Like, for example, let's say we have a AWS. we have Azure. So whenever I'm having a cloud service provider, whenever I'm developing something, I must be able to make that application communicate with multiple cloud providers, or I must be able to use some of my components in AWS, and the components must be able to communicate with Azure. So like that, I must be able to work together with multiple providers with the same, or basically I'm able to reuse things. That is what we call as a interoperability. And finally, which is something not so concerned in our perspective, but yes, it can be a concern for us. The last but not least, the thing is called as team. Okay, the last but not least thing is what we call as a service dependencies and partnerships. So why it is important to us, team? So basically, let's say, for example, the cloud service provider may be getting the services or maybe some features from different vendors. And the service providers definitely may have multiple vendors, and basically they will support. And we have to, as a customer, it is our responsibility to understand the provider's relationship with the key vendors, their accreditation levels and their technical capabilities and all, because end of the day, it's a supply chain. So if something goes wrong on the vendor side, it will affect our cloud service provider, and in turn, it will affect the customer also. To avoid that, we have to clearly understand what all vendor relationships or subcontractors the cloud service provider is having, because if something goes wrong in between, it can end result, it will affect the customers. And I can basically give you a lot more reasons or a lot more things to compare the cloud providers, right? But still, team, these are the key things which I felt as a very important thing while choosing a cloud service provider. And you can ask your doubts in the comment box, team. Thank you so much.